Coming up this Thursday, the Trump administration's now signed off on a new AGOA deal allowing South Africa duty-free access to the US market again. But don't celebrate too quickly, warns our seasoned business journalist Jan Cronje. Those pesky 30% Liberation Day tariffs remain, and our trade delegations yet to really strike any new overriding deal.
The Liberation Day tariffs, the 30% tariffs, and the Section 232 tariffs, which are 25% and upwards, are still in place. We don't again have this wonderful preferential near duty-free access that we had a decade ago, or even 2 years ago. That's disappeared. But what the reauthorization of AGOA has done, say the analysts, is it's lowered duties somewhat.
Later in the show, we remember Dr. Neil Agate with On This Day in South African History.
To know when the next episode drops, hit the like, follow, and subscribe buttons on our YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcast channels.
In Roby's Pointless Fry Quiz for today, new draft rules for dacha possession are out for public comment. The question is, how many grams of cannabis does the Justice Ministry think South Africans should be allowed to carry? I'll give you the answer at the end of the show. Get it right? You'll score the priceless prize of being the most informed person around the Braai Place. My name's Graham Robenheimer. This is The Lead, and this is The South African Story. Moving to our top story today, trade. Tariffs. Well, we're in tough global economic times, that's for sure. Treacherous waters, some would say. Although South Africa's situation apparently is looking up, we face an uphill trade war with the United States. That remains. Here to help us navigate the latest developments is our seasoned business journalist, Jan Cronje, who's following the AGOA agreement and its ratification by the Trump administration. Always lucky to have you on, Jan. How's it?
Good, Graham. How are you?
Yeah, I can't complain. A busy week. It's been a bit chaotic, and I can't believe it's only just the start of February, but here we are. Help us understand this. There have been two AGOA pieces of legislation over in the United States on the go, right? So one has just been ratified, signed by Donald Trump himself, the US president, after being cleared by the two legislative houses of in the United States, which is the House of Representatives as well as the Senate. And if I remember correctly, the House of Representatives represents people on the ground, whereas the Senate represents more states. One's been ratified, that's only for a 1-year extension, and then there's this other version of it, which may be 3 years extension, which is still in the works. Does that sound about right?
That's right, Graham. The long and short of it is that Trump has signed a 1-year reauthorization of AGOA. Now, this was signed as part of a much larger omnibus spending bill that was actually, you could say, rushed through the two houses of Congress to stop their government shutdown. It seems, Graham, that if you really need something to happen in the US, you have to have a government shutdown, then everyone gets, okay, let's pass legislation. Let's just put everything we want to in a huge bill. It's 1,000 pages long. And there, on page 700 and something, it says the African Growth and Opportunity Act will now expire at the end of this year. It's half a page long, perhaps 2 pages. So that's included in the bill, right? So that effectively means that AGOA, which lapsed last year, has now restarted, but only for a year. And you're quite correct in saying that there's a completely different, separate bill that was passed by the House that extends it for 3 years. I don't know if much is going to come from that bill now, as both sides have agreed on the separate 1-year extension, but that bill is still, in theory, alive, quote unquote, and the Senate could move it forward, although I think that's quite unlikely now.
Okay, and then I think let's just, so that we don't confuse the listener, for the rest of our chat, let's just focus on this 1-year extension until the end of the year, because it's the only thing we haven't cemented at the moment. South Africa's not exempt.
Yes, South Africa is still in the bill. We are still part of AGOA.
Fantastic. So that's good news, right?
Well, it is very good news because there are some in the US that want to see us removed from AGOA for various reasons. They cite our closeness to Iran, to Russia, to China. They cite various other reasons. But it seems that when this short-term reauthorization was actually passed, the Trump administration was focusing on actually, ending the shutdown. So it didn't go into the weeds about exactly who's going to be exempted from AGOA. He now has quite a lot of leeway to now exempt us. Yeah, but we've heard nothing concrete from that side yet. So as things stand, we're still part of it.
Maybe if he needs somebody to whisper in his ear, hey, did you hear South Africa? La, 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 la. And then you go suddenly wake up and go, oh, what's happened here? I don't know.
We could very well, see a post on Truth Social referencing South Africa, referencing our trade. You never know.
You really don't. It's become one of a bit of a bane of existence of us following US developments here in the South African political space. Let's remind everybody who's thinking, okay, what's this AGOA thing all about? Let's just remind them the basics here. It essentially allows us duty-free access to export certain things over to the United States that would not come with certain tariffs, right?
That's right, Graham. It dates from 2000 when Bill Clinton was still the US president. And what's a little bit different about AGOA to other trade agreements is that it is agreement between the US and lots of African countries. So it's not a bilateral agreement with us and the US. About 30 African countries form part of it. And we, just speaking about South Africa now, get duty-free access to the US for some of our goods that's quite helpful to our local industries. For example, citrus, cars, manufacturing additives for steel, yachts, a few other things. Now, if AGOA wasn't there, and after it lapsed last year it wasn't there, these exports would have duties on them. So America would be paying more for our products and they'd be less competitive, right? So this has been really good for us for the last 25 years or so. America doesn't get duty-free access to us. It's not that kind of agreement, which is why it's a little bit strange, and you have to actually explain what's happening there. So the quid pro quo was, we'll give you duty-free access to the world's biggest market, the US, and in response, you have to do certain things for us. And these are, so when I look at my official AGOA notes here.
Thanks for having it handy.
Yep. You have to have a market-based economy, the rule of law, political pluralism, the right to due process. You have to eliminate barriers to US trade. They don't have to come down to zero. They just have to be eliminated. You have to enact policies to reduce poverty, combat corruption, etc., etc., etc. So
the ANC would like to think it's signed and
tick,
dotted
tick, tick.
and ticked many of those boxes.
Yeah, it's like we're crushing this, guys. So that was the quid pro quo. So African countries would democratize, and then they could send their goods to the US. And it has worked pretty much with bipartisan support in the US and strong support in Africa for the last 25 years or so, until the Trump administration came in the second administration and started to have doubts about what America was actually getting out of this.
And then, of course, we had the 30% tariffs slapped by the Trump administration, which is to be called the Liberation Day tariffs, right? Now, this adds a complex layer to everything. Yes, that came sort of first before we now understand that AGOA has been extended to the end of the year. Let's just try and simplify it as much as possible, because I also would like to understand it better. With those 30% tariff slap, what is exempt in terms of our major exports there, and what is hurt? And then let's talk to AGOA and see how that layer sort of adds to the complexity. So let's begin with the 30% tariffs. What is exempted, what's not?
Right, good. Yeah, so there's 30% tariffs exempted some of our most important exports. Platinum group metals, gold, other precious metals, right? America doesn't produce these metals itself, so it doesn't want to pay extra to buy them from South Africa.
Yeah.
It wants to get them as cheaply as possible. No one was seriously ever considering putting tariffs on platinum. It doesn't make any economic sense.
Yeah.
Also exempt now is some of our citrus exports. Oranges are, I think mandarins aren't. Macadamia nuts, we're a big producer apparently of those.
Yes.
Certain kinds of fruit juices, exempt. I think the tariffs are zero or near zero. Wine and table grapes, another two of our big exports, are not exempt, so they are being tariffed at these Liberation Day tariffs.
And then automotive parts are not exempt.
Correct. And then, Graham, not only do you have these Liberation Day tariffs, which puts a kind of across-the-board 30% tariff on just everything from South Africa, but then there are hundreds of exemptions. You have these separate, what they call Section 232 tariffs.
Thank you for bringing this in.
And these put tariffs on cars, automotive parts, certain kinds of steel, certain kind of manufactured metal goods. And those are hurting our car exports to the US. So we've got this 1-2 punch. The Liberation Day tariffs and the Section 232 tariffs aren't cumulative. So they don't add to each other, but they still are these two walls that are, blocking some. Well, they're not blocking our exports, but making it more difficult for us to export. Luckily, many of our minerals, the unwrought minerals, are still going there without tariffs.
Right. So now adds the AGOA layer to this unprecedented time with the Liberation Day tariffs. What does that change really in effect, if anything?
Yeah. So good point, Graham, because this is the tricky part. When Trump extended AGOA, it didn't automatically nullify the Liberation Day tariffs or the Section 232 tariffs. They're still there. And to check this, we talked to as many people as we could, and we said, look, just explain this to us. They're still there. They said, yes, they're still there.
That's very important, lead listeners. Just repeat what you just said, Jan.
Yeah, absolutely. The Liberation Day tariffs, the 30% tariffs, and the Section 232 tariffs, which are 25% and upwards, are still in place. We don't again have this wonderful preferential near duty-free access that we had a decade ago, or even 2 years ago. That's disappeared. But what the reauthorization of AGOA has done, say the analysts, is it's lowered duties somewhat. So if we take the example of cars, Graham, one of our biggest value-added exports.
Sure. Which has been a big one for us, hey? Even since the 60s.
Yeah.
It's has been a huge part of South Africa's export market for a really long time because, of course, we know during the apartheid years, if I can just add this historical context, obviously we had to be very self-serving given all the economic sanctions that were placed on us since the Sharpeville massacre. And so during that 60s, 70s period, we really created this self-sustaining sort of automobile manufacturing industry that even rivaled Britain at one point. And that tradition has stayed on in South Africa for a really long time. So it is an important part of our economy. Please continue.
Absolutely. And it's the biggest value added export that we have of like a finished good. I mean, that's what we actually want to export, right? We don't. Yes, we want to export unwrought platinum, but we want to export things that we've made. Under AGOA, when AGOA lapsed, the tariff for a car made in South Africa exported to the US was 27.5%. Now, because AGOA has been reauthorized, it's got marginally cheaper. The tariff that the US is paying is now 25%. So we have got a 2.5% off this. And there's quite a complex explanation that has to do with world trade rules that I don't think we have to go into there. But you see that the reauthorization of AGOA has given us a marginal benefit with cars, but it's definitely not gone down to what we'd like. I mean, the tariffs haven't decreased. Now the trade gurus say that things are much better when you look at textile exports, right? Now, we don't export that much textiles to the US, but Lesotho does, so this could have some benefits for Lesotho. But basically, this reauthorization is not going to be the
silver bullet,
amazing silver bullet that we'd hoped it to be. That will be when those Liberation Day and Section 232 tariffs are gone, or we do a bilateral trade deal with the US.
Which, on that note, Jan, excellently surmised, I must say. On that note, Trade and Industry Minister Parks Tau, of course, we heard our colleague Garth Tennyson, who was, of course, in Davos, Switzerland for the World Economic Forum. He was rubbing shoulders with Parks Tau, the minister there, and Tau let on to Garth that he was feeling quite buoyant that the official sort of US-SA trade negotiations, which would in essence, in theory, in its simplest form, try to override everything that you and I have just discussed, that process would begin again soon, and that it would be hopeful that we'd get to some sort of good negotiating space. Now with AGOA, it seems like there's that glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel is a little bit bigger at the moment. What has the minister since told you about that buoyancy?
Yeah, I'd say so. There's we're probably in a slightly better position just because the Trump administration didn't purposefully exclude us when they signed the bill and rant about South Africa in the Oval Office. But so that's a positive sign. But I don't have particular insight into the status of those trade negotiations.
I don't think anybody does.
No, and the DTIC has been keeping it quite close to their chest. But asked yesterday for his reaction, Tau gave positive noises that reauthorizing AGOA is a good thing. It's to be welcomed, and he hopes that in time this will lead to more cooperation between South Africa and the US. So we'll have to wait and see what actually comes from that.
Because let's just end it here. We need the US.
Yeah.
Whether we like it or not, let's move all the political noise out of it. We need the US regardless. Yeah. We're talking about multi-billions
yes.
in US dollars that we could stand to benefit. Yes, the South African economy is showing great signs of rebounding after the darkest years of state capture. That doesn't take away from the fact that we still need to do business with the US. And, Trump's not going to be there forever.
Yeah. Well, Graham, that's a good point. The US is our second biggest export partner after China. And what the government has been trying to do is now find new export markets and in the Middle East and other places. But it's going to take a really long time for those countries to rival even collectively what we export in a year to the US. And we've got these long-standing export relationships there, and they know us and they trust us, and they like certain of our goods. So we want to keep that from a financial business perspective as foreign currency earnings to South Africa. We want to keep that relationship as strong as possible.
Yeah. Well, let's hope it does. I mean, the pendulum continues to swing, right? Yeah. Trump's not, like I said, Trump is not going to be there forever. Yes, perhaps there will be a Republican shift for some time, but and who knows what it's going to look like in future. I mean, we're not soothsayers.
Yeah.
But US politics is quite fickle. It can turn blue overnight, right?
Yeah.
And then we've got to be prepared for perhaps a new AGOA deal and all of this being a thing of the past, and then looking back on these particular discussions and going, remember that time when we were talking about the most craziest of economic situations? Because let's also take a moment to realize that we are in just completely weird times. It feels like we're in the 1920s when we had like the things like Smoot-Hawley tariff. A lot of people don't know this, but the current Trump administration's maneuverings are nothing new. There's this thing called the Smoot-Hawley tariff. It actually only exacerbated the Great Depression, and it was very much the same thing. It was the US trying to protect its agriculture sector and putting these tariffs in place, and it kind of inadvertently sort of backfired for a while. Yes, some would argue that long term it helped the US to sort of become more self-sustaining again. Is that what Trump's trying to achieve here?
I mean, broadly, yeah. I mean, broadly, quite right. He's trying to protect US industry, inculcate US industry. I think when Trump looks at China and he sees it as the factory of the world, and his companies were partly responsible for offshoring US jobs to China when it suited him.
I believe. I was waiting for that.
I believe. But anyway, when he looks at it now and he says China's become the factory of the world, when at one stage the UK was the factory of the world, it lost that out to us. We've now lost it to China. We need to regain that, okay? Because otherwise, we need to create our own things here in the US.
And then someone would argue, why can't South Africa do the same for itself, right? Yeah. And I think that's how the ripple effect of all of this happens globally and economically is that, when you have this huge hegemonic power doing what it's doing, it's kind of forcing the other countries to also cloister up and think about its own means, right? Which has a huge knock-on effect. Anyway, we could sit here for hours and talk about the what-ifs. Jan, baie dankie, ek waardeer dit.
Thank you, Graham.
Have a great weekend.
You too, man.
You're listening to the latest edition of The Lead on News 24 with Graham Rowenheimer. If you've got an opinion on what you've heard so far, drop us a short voice note on our WhatsApp hotline. That's 072 562 3179. Looking for a smarter weekend scroll? The Weekender is your ultimate guide to bold stories, sharp opinion, and a fresh lens on life in Mzansi. From exclusive interviews and powerful essays to wine picks, playlists, and pop culture gems, it's your perfect weekend read all in one place, landing every Saturday on News 24. And finally,
time now for On This Day in South African History. It's the 5th of February 1982. Trade unionist and Dr. Neil Agate, Transvaal organizer for the Food and Canning Workers Union, died in detention at the age of just 28. Reportedly, according to apartheid authorities, by suicide. He was the first white detainee to die in police custody since 1963. While known for his very quiet, principled commitment to worker rights, Agate was widely respected across racial lines in the labor movement. Decades later, a 2022 inquest found that he did not take his own life, but was rather murdered by members of the apartheid security branch, overturning that original finding. In Roby's Pointless Braai Quiz for today, we asked, new draft rules for dagga possession are out for public comment. Essentially, the question goes, how many grams of cannabis does the Justice Ministry think South Africans should be allowed to carry? That's both in public and private. And the answer is 750 grams, which, as News 24 business journalist William Brederode writes, equates to some roughly 2,000 joints. All I know is that's a lot of smoke for one standard user. Well, if this was your answer all along, congratulations, you scored the priceless prize of being the most informed person around the Braai Place. That's it for The Lead this week. We'll see you same place, same time next week from Monday, 7 p.m. on all of your favorite podcast networks. My name's Graham Robenheimer, and so long as there's trusted news first, we'll always have The Lead.